All right, so today would be the 24th. Time is flying. October 24th, 2025. It's the Ips morning deprogram. Yesterday I was out by these cottonwoods near the river, and I talked for about 20 minutes about why Candace Owens is an actress and her conspiracy theory meltdown is all contrived. And not only did nobody show up to the live stream, like maybe one or two people at a time, but it didn't even remain uploaded on YouTube. Like, it's there, you can comment on it, but you can't watch it. Not saying I'm being censored, but I just think that it's kind of an anomalous occurrence. So if you're wondering why there's a blank video, I just have it there just for record-keeping purposes. It means I need to talk about it again. We need to talk about the understanding, the perspective that we've taken. Because we're not taking these occurrences that we're noticing and then just processing it with everything else. No, there's a continuity here. If A, then B. A lot of people stick with maybe A, maybe not, and they go back to the mainstream. Case in point, there are people who are ambiguous about whether Charlie Kirk is 6 feet under or hanging out in New Zealand. Like, is he alive or is he dead? And some will say, well, I don't know, I'm ambiguous. Okay, well, it means you're confused. And that's fine, you can be confused. The world is confused. But if you say it doesn't matter, it means you haven't really thought it through. Because if he is, well, then it's a whodunit. Was it the left wing or was it Israel? And if he isn't, well, then we can point to a number of individuals and entities that are therefore directly involved in the deception. And if you follow that with a few other questions, you realize once you pass the bloody guardrail, the entire world stage unravels. So if you're already there, if you're already looking at this from that perspective, that includes media fakery, history bending, news bending, if you're already there, well, then you cannot take certain things for granted. So you look at someone like Candace Owens, and you can't just say, oh, she's just investigating. She's just looking for facts. She's one of us. Well, no. She's not only complicit in part of this thing, but she's disseminating narratives to a target demographic. She's not exploring. That's why the title of the live stream was Controlled Opposition and the Well-Paved Rabbit Trails. She's on a well-paved rabbit trail. So now her conspiracy meltdown that she's going through publicly is all contrived. And it's made to create a perception about people who don't trust the mainstream news, among other things. She's like, it's sort of like a David Icke / Alex Jones type of thing where these big conspiracy theorists take some kind of a fall on behalf of their subscribers who are naive in thinking that they can trust this person because they're posturing as opposition, as fighting an info war. But that aside, if you haven't arrived at the conclusion that his death was faked, I mean, it's definitely fakeable, we've made that case. If you haven't arrived at that, then you might still think she's legitimate, and you might still be caught in the world stage. So I'm just making a point here about perspectives, because I'm working on a whiteboard infographic right now. I'm outlining it so I can make a video later. But let me just go ahead and start with this outline. So I think there's some key points that have been described by us quite clearly, but they're maybe not understood by those who are outside of our think tank. So when we say world stage, and what do we mean? And then, of course, the off-world stage, because these are points of view. So ultimately, we're talking about points of view. So we can all agree that the mainstream mediated point of view, which accepts all the news as fundamentally true, is not the same as the conspiracy theorist point of view, which says everything in the mainstream is a lie and we need additional facts. So these are two different frames to process everything. And these are fundamentally different from the point of view that subtracts what they can't verify from the mainstream. And that's what we refer to as MSM minus, a subtractive view. So these are three different perspectives. The first one is credulous when it comes to the mainstream, takes everything at face value. The second is incredulous, which is distinct from skepticism. They automatically disbelieve. So both of these are typified by being automatic, reflexive, non-critical, non-skeptical. Because skeptical requires parsing the facts on both sides, not automatically, reflexively rejecting the other side. The third point of view, the off-world stage perspective, as I call it, this one recognizes that the first two are actually in a closed system. So the mainstream and alternative exist in a closed system, meaning it's closed to a number of things, but it's a closed informational system that is essentially a duopoly when it comes to news media. And this box, or this circle, whatever you want to call it, this is what I call mainstream mediation. The conspiracy stuff is a subset. I put the plus there because it builds on. So now what we're looking at here, that closed system, this is the world stage. The world stage is the worldview, encompassing both mainstream and alternative views on the world itself, on history, on news, the entire media ecosystem. So now if we're looking at this world stage, and I'm going to draw it here as a profile. And the world stage is mainstream mediation plus the subset, MSM plus. The world stage is built upon our history. So this is today, this is the now. Yesterday's news, got Charlie Kirk, pushed back a little further, just year after year, or this is basically going back in time. But if we're just looking at recent history, our recent history rests upon the presupposition that these things are real. That's the mainstream view, or a variant of it, which is the conspiracy version. So the world stage is the perspective you have if you live within their closed informational system. What I term off-world stage refers to the perspective that looks at this, but recognizes it's not inclusive of media fakery. It's not inclusive of news bending, which refers to how simulated events, psychological operations influence the news cycles and steer the news cycles, which bounce off of it, creating hyperstitions, hyper-reality, blending real and fake seamlessly. But news bending isn't just bending that news cycle or that particular agenda, because it's cumulative, it builds up. And we've been, focusing on maybe the last 100 years of psyops or so, but it's a consistent pattern, it's a template, it's standard operating procedure, it is systemic fakery. So if you look at it from the long-term perspective, this is history bending. It's very Orwellian. It's about controlling the present, the past, and the future by controlling the fake news cycles. So the off-world stage perspective takes this into account, that the world stage is non-objective. So the world stage, this bubble reality, it's non-objective, and it's acquired passively. By passively, I mean there's no critical processing or investigation or thinking about the information. It's more or less a matter of believing your trusted source. And it's passive whether you're in the mainstream box or you're passively getting your Kool-Aid from Alex Jonestown in MSM+. It's also defined by, breaking news, a rush to believe, ideological warfare, which is what typifies it. Whereas, every single psyop is every major fake event. One of the hallmarks, one of the giveaways that it's fake is that the interpretation is perfectly split down the middle, and the left and the right within their political horseshoe fight over it in predictable ways, and it has immediately implementable political agendas attached to it. The active consumption of media which looks more peaceful, means you're pausing before you believe. And this is where skepticism comes in. Because while the mainstream is incredulous about conspiracies and rejects them, and the alternative media is incredulous about the mainstream and rejects it, each side is completely credulous towards its own side. So again, incredulity is not skepticism. Incredulity will build a straw man, a weak version of the opponent's argument, and it'll incinerate it. A skeptic will build a steel man, the best and strongest version of the opponent's arguments, and it will melt it. The skeptical perspective includes looking at all the information, which means you necessarily have to take a pause before you can judge. You don't know enough to believe it because you saw it on the screen, nor do you know enough to not believe it because you saw it on the screen. You can't say, I don't believe that Trump was shot because it looked so fake. It didn't look fake, objectively speaking. If you say it did, what are your criteria? Could you actually convey that and convince somebody? No, you could not. And the screen has the assumed authority. There's an appeal to authority built into it. So you're already working against that. So you need more. I would never argue that the visual deconstruction is sufficient in and of itself. We look at the entire media ecosystem, which builds up a psyop. I have this concept of the blindfolded skeptic. You shouldn't need to see it to know it's a staged event, because the way these staged events are portrayed and revealed and conveyed to us, it's on many different platforms. It's many different modalities. It's not just what you can see. It's all about context. So you should be able to hear the whole thing and discern it. You should be able to have your questions answered and look at all the hoax indicators that are brought up without ever needing to reference to the screen alone. That's a very low information take, and it's not going to be possible to rely on that moving into the future if what you have been relying upon are mistakes made by the perps themselves, which again, that's not a strong approach or methodology. It's not sustainable. So when I say passive, I mean, of course, that they're passively accepting anything from within that closed informational system from their chosen source. Active means pausing before you believe and assessing the facts before. And if you don't have enough to believe it, the burden of proof is not on you. So this is a world of believers. They're believers because they don't have enough information to know. They fill in the gap with faith and trust in media, faith and trust in influencers, faith and trust in Candace Owens and her alleged sources, or Alex Jones and his alleged sources. So they're believers. And that's a dependent position on their chosen priesthood. The off-world stage would refer to non-believers. If we believed it, we wouldn't call ourselves believers. If we had reasons to believe it, we'd be like, well, we know this to be true. So there's a real important distinction between knowing and believing. And if we don't have enough information to know it's true, we don't become believers. Rather, we reject it. We become non-believers, but we are informed non-believers. So I would weigh two things here. I would weigh informed non-belief against low information belief. Oh, I believe it because I saw the headlines, because I saw it on TV. Okay, that's low information belief. Now let's weigh that against what we bring to the table, which is a lot more information, inclusive of media fakery, news bending, history bending, the wider context. So our non-belief has a lot to substantiate it. So I would say that the informed non-believer is in a better, stronger position than the low information believer. So now we have two different perspectives that I'm describing in the big picture here: off world stage and world stage. World stagers are the ones who exist in this paradigm, in this bubble, generally typified by low information, non-objective, non-skeptical, reflexive. And the off-world stage is typified by informed disbelief, and including in their every assessment the existence of decades of fake news. And again, straw man arguments will say, well, you guys say all the news is fake. No, we don't. I would say that 1%, 5%, a small percentage is fake, but here's the problem with that, is that it's the simulated events that we're referring to as fake. And these are the ones that drive the narratives, that drive the news cycles. But all of the, quote, real news bounces off of it. So even the real news loses objectivity. So you've got fake news, and you've got non-objective, contaminated news. So you can't say it's all fake. There's a bit more nuance to it, but it all rests upon an edifice of fakery, of presuppositions that have been ruled out as anything more than lies, superstitions. So now, to further make this point that there's a different perspective involved, and this came the other day. I was debating with somebody and they said, we don't have enough information to know. We weren't there. And I'm like, don't include me in your we. Your we might be inclusive of world stagers, but you're not including all this peripheral information, which is extremely relevant. In fact, most of it's just dismissed as mere coincidence. So the perspective matters here. World stagers or off-world stagers. It's one of the two. And the off-world stage is what I refer to as the deprogrammed. Because the fake news isn't random. All the fake news events that we talk about, the more recent one was the Charlie Kirk squibbing, these are fictional events that are put into our historic timeline. This is history. News becomes history. So the news piles up and becomes history. And this is a repeated thing. And so when you look at one of these fake events, we'll just say that Charlie Kirk thinks it's most recent. This particular event happens in 2025, and now it's going into our history books. Even though we know it was a squibbing, whatever your interpretation of it, it's going into the history books as a real event. And it's not the first one. So there's a script involved. The script involves a 31-year-old Christian nationalist winning the hearts and minds of the youth, getting taken out at the beginning of his America comeback tour, the ACT, the ACT. And this is a very graphic event, and it creates this almost a revival on the right, Turning Point USA, which is, it's all fake grassroots, we know that. But this is the story, the historic narrative. As Jack Posobiec put it at the memorial service, he said this will be seen as the sacrifice that was the turning point that saved Western civilization. He said, 100 years from now, the history books will say this was the turning point that saved Western civilization. So if you think about it in these terms, that's how it operates. These are historic events that are steering our collective consensus. The paradigm is written in advance, and it's performed through the bread and circuses. It's performed on TV, these pre-scheduled events. So you look at an event like 9/11, for example, or the London bombings, both of which were attended by drills, concurrent drills that were perfectly matching what, quote, actually happened. So you can already understand that these events require pre-planning. There's obviously a great deal of work that goes into making these things happen. It's like a movie. So they're not just dropping it they're not just on the fly. Hey, let's do this tomorrow on Thursday. No, these things are planned in advance. So how far back in advance was the Charlie Kirk thing planned? You know, people make this is the part that is going to keep people on the world stage. The part where they will not be able to accept the premise that something could be planned years in advance. That's too hard for them, which is fine. You can be incredulous, but if you look at what we're presenting as evidence and you're skeptical, then you might see where we're coming from. So my contention is that the Charlie Kirk event was planned, that the script for it existed at least as far back as 1998. Because the content, the predictive content, the programming content, the product placement for the future fake event first appears in 1998 in Snake Eyes. And Snake Eyes was widely noticed by mainstream and alternative sources, although they didn't mention conspicuously any of the other examples. And they're all interconnected. So this is what I'm getting at, is that the earliest example of predictive programming for this event in 2025 exists in 1998. So when you look at the other examples, and there's others from 2025, there's one from 2012. The Emerson music video. Then you have a couple of podcast references, with one with Charlie Kirk. Then you have, of course, Heads of State and Hulu The Tempest. All of these, and then we can add in, there's a few others I could add in from 2025, like Americana, where the guy gets shot in the neck. Very symbolic, the concept of Americana to America Comeback Tour to MAGA and Turning Point USA. They shot Americana in the neck when they shot Charlie Kirk. They shot a guy in the neck in Americana. And this is a repeated theme that happens concurrent with the real event. So we're looking at the media being saturated through various propaganda vectors with the same themes, the same imagery. But every example of the predictive programming, and they're all overlapping, like 2025 Heads of State has Vice President Elizabeth Kirk, who's the same actress who dies next to Charlie Kirkland in Snake Eyes. So if we look at all these examples in entertainment and podcasts and from influencers that tie to the Charlie Kirk event, the earliest example is Snake Eyes, but they all contain repeated elements, common denominators. The common denominators imply a common script, and I'm suggesting that the script for the event would necessarily, and this is logically speaking, the script for the Charlie Kirk assassination would necessarily precede all of the propaganda inserts of it. So if it's going to show up in movies, if it's going to show up in books and video games, the script had to come first. And then whoever's got the script, the guy from the Central World News Services, is taking it around to different sellouts, whether they be in the movies, authors, artists, or otherwise, and they ensure that this messaging gets put in these specific ways into their content. So with Snake Eyes and these other ones connecting to Charlie Kirk, they all had a storm. They all reference, this is again, September 10th, although Snake Eyes, it was the 19th, there was this big misconception, but you'll see this pattern here. Storm, September 10th, the name Tyler, like Tyler the Executioner in Snake Eyes. So you have the storm, September 10th, Tyler as the executioner, and then you have the neck wound in a very specific place, left side of the neck. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is just kind of scratching the surface. These 4 repeated elements, in addition to the names, Kirk, I should probably put that there too. So you have Charlie Kirk, Charlie Kirkland, Vice President Kirk. And then you have I could probably get into a couple other details here, but we'll just stick with these ones for now. So here we have a good solid 5 examples of elements that are inserted into all of the predictive and concurrent programming instances here. So the common denominators would all be on the original script. Every fake event must have a script. And if they're scripting an event 25 years in advance, that's a lot of time for product placement, for advertisement, for using every propaganda vector to condition the future experiencers of the fake event to the inevitability of it. Total saturation. A lot of people became familiar with this concept with 9/11, even though it's never been fully explained. Like who's doing it, who's behind it. And generally they run to the lazy explanation is it must be a simulation or it must be a coincidence. Well, the coincidence thing has been thoroughly refuted thanks to Erica Kirk, because the very personage of Erica Kirk walking across the world stage today mirrors her Hulu character and has since the day of the event. So if you're not familiar with Hulu The Tempest, and you're just rejecting this information, well, then you don't have enough information. To be skeptical, you have to look at what we're presenting. So Hulu The Tempest has a leader of the Young Republicans, very Charlie Kirk-like, in a church getting shot on the left side of the neck. And this was released on September 10th, the day Charlie Kirk was shot. Charlie Kirk was there in South Korea being prayed over by the youth Republicans represented in the Hulu show, just 4 days before. After he's shot and killed on 9/10, his widow takes over his organization, the Young Republicans, or the New Republicans, just as Erica Kirk gets tapped to take over Turning Point USA. As the story evolves, there are many who think that the widow is faking her grief, that grief is supposed to be ugly, she was too dignified, that maybe she was behind the assassination. All this has actually appeared in this Erica Kirk story. Look at Candace Owens insinuating that Erica Kirk was behind it. Look at how many people are saying Erica Kirk's not crying enough, she's not really mourning. Yeah, this is mirroring her character. And this is just the superficial stuff. It gets more nuanced, especially with references to Valhalla, Valkyrie, the storm itself. Erica Kirk was called the Storm by Stephen Miller. She was actually called the Storm. And The Tempest is about this widow who is a storm. She's like a political storm when she takes over her husband's organization. Snake Eyes had the storm, Hurricane Jezebel, as a background. So what does the storm symbolize? Well, it's a reoccurring theme in every one of these examples, and the name Jezebel is likely a reference to Erica Kirk, who begins to look very shady when in the 2012 video, she's flying by the number 910 on a zip line in Vegas. And in the comment section on September 10th, 2012 says to the filmmaker, "Hey, Tyler, what a great shoot. We had a blast." So another reference to Tyler, 910, a shoot. And again, this is to some, this is like, okay, this is weird. This implies that she knew. And I go through the comments on that Emerson Drive, She's My Kind of Crazy video, and a lot of people are thinking, okay, she's part of some dark plot, some deep state thing, Trump's in on it, and they took out Charlie because he was going to turn his back on Israel. So they have these world stage friendly conspiracies to explain away her villainous character. But her villainous character is a construct. It's a script, and it perfectly matches the Hulu thing. It matches her Hulu corresponding character. Now, if you look at the other character in Snake Eyes, the femme fatale blonde, deceptive, in the center of the conspiracy, that tracks. And then, funnily enough, after Charlie Kirk died, somebody floated around and it went kind of pseudo-viral that Erica Kirk should run as vice president with J.D. Vance in 2028. So I see this, wait, Vice President Kirk? The new movie Heads of State that just came out has a Vice President Kirk. And guess where Vice President Kirk gets shot? That's right. She gets shot in the neck. So, okay, now you have the character in a movie representing the widow of Charlie Kirk getting shot in the neck, and it's the same actress who was next to Charlie Kirkland when he's shot in the neck. Interestingly, in Hulu The Tempest, the opening scene is actually the widow dreaming she's her husband getting shot in the neck. And so you have the visual of the hole on the left side of the neck in Heads of State, in Hulu The Tempest twice, with Charlie Kirk, in Americana. You even have Ryan Ralph trying to stab himself in that exact part of the neck, if you saw that picture. So how many references do we have to that? It gets pretty immersive too. Synchromorpheus found Alejandro Kirk, a baseball player, Cardinal, in this article where he's described as a pain in the neck. And they have this picture where they're dumping Gatorade on him or something, and it's like spurting out. It looks like it's coming out of his neck. Like, we're talking about an echo chamber where there's no meaningful distinction between news and entertainment. They have merged real and fake. It's what Baudrillard would call hyper-real. And people live in this hyper-reality. They don't know how infused it is with fiction. Well, if a percentage of your major events are fake, then you can no longer claim to live in objective reality. And this is not something new. We're looking back at the Kennedy assassination, or in fact, Kennedy assassination. Was he shot from the front or the back? Charlie Kirk, was he shot from the front or the back? These are well-paved rabbit trails. You know, the director of the Manchurian Candidate, where you get the whole idea of the mind-controlled assassin, comes from, the director is John Frankenheimer. He drove RFK to the Ambassador Hotel. What happened to RFK at the Ambassador Hotel, 1968? Was it June 5th? He was shot by a mind-controlled assassin. We've been talking about this use of Hollywood by government to fake historic events. That's what's happening. That's what has been happening. That's what media does. Media is a liar. And it recruits the special effects departments for the purposes of history bending. It puts actors on the world stage. So now, getting back to what I was originally saying, knowing that Erica Kirk and Charlie Kirk would necessarily be actors, then you look at the surrounding characters, and there's no reason to take what they're saying very seriously. I mean, they're reading scripts. They're not discovering new information. It's not like Candace Owens, Ian Carroll, Owen Schroyer, or David Icke, or Alex Jones could ever talk about even the hypothetical that Charlie Kirk isn't dead. Especially because a lot of them knew him. They can't even go there. And they're not like in the dark about it because they're part of the same infrastructure. A lot of these individuals are all backstage. They're all part of the program. We have to remember too, there's a continuity. The same production company that gave us Butler, Pennsylvania, provided the Charlie Kirk squibbing. So now, to kind of round this out here, we're talking about different points of view. So what is your point of view? Are you mainstream? Are you MSM plus? Or if you're cognizant of the program and you see how it's done, if you see how they do their magic tricks, if you understand that there's a relationship between entertainment and psyops, and this is one of the big secrets they don't want you to know. Yes, the entertainment, this includes video games, books, everything. There's a relationship between entertainments and psyops. If you recognize all of this, you're no longer mainstream. You no longer look at these things as disconnected. You're not MSM plus because the conspiracy theorists haven't figured this out. No, you have a different perspective on it. You're more informed. This perspective is the one that's cognizant of the program, is what I call deprogrammed. So when I say the IPS deprogram, we're talking about the world stage and world events from the perspective of those who are cognizant of the program and the subsequent worldview, the world stage, the Truman Show. If you don't know you're in a Truman Show, you're in it. If you don't know there's a program, you're following it. If you've been consuming predictive content and reinforcement concurrent content for these events, yeah, you're just going with the programming. You've been pre-programmed. You were programmed for 9/11. You've been programmed for every single psyop they've hit you with. And you've been programmed through the entertainment. And if you don't recognize this, you're not deprogrammed. You can't claim it. It's a pointless thing. It's like, I'm awake. I'm a truther. I'm so awake. No, you're not awake. Red pills don't make you awake. They put you into a deeper level of programming because now you're within a subset of the mainstream. The most unawake people are the truthers who are caught up in a nightmare version of the mainstream worldview. Blue pill is a dream. It's blissful. Don't wake them. Red pill is a nightmare. Neither is effectively awake. To be awake is to be cognizant of the program. So if your point of view is inclusive of the program, then you can claim to be off-world stage. But deprogramming is it's really not an option if you're on the world stage. It's not platformed. Nobody's going to tell you this. The only platform for the off-world stage perspective is the IPS. Find me an example of another platform that is specifically situated to be outside not only of their paradigm, but cognizant and of the entire build-up to it, which is the bent history. So history bending is a key component to all of this. It's cumulative, it's continuous. These aren't isolated events. It is systemic fakery. Now, Another way to explain point of view, I think this is very helpful, is think about ChatGPT. Anything you ask, ChatGPT, what happened to Charlie Kirk? Well, it's going to be aware of the conspiracy theories. It's going to assume the mainstream version, but it's not going to ever bring you to the idea that maybe Charlie Kirk is alive. And that's because its knowledge base and its frame of reference will guardrail it against that possibility. So ChatGPT, or AI in general, has a world stage point of view. AI is a world stager. Everything that goes through AI is going to come out from a world stage point of view. Just like Wikipedia. If you read anything on Wikipedia, what do you think its point of view is going to be? Mainstream mediation. It will be aware of the conspiracies. It's just not going to treat them as real. But they will not even acknowledge the off-world stage. So there's a big difference between the censored and the unacknowledged. The censored are the Alex Joneses, the ones that get deplatformed. Like Tucker Carlson gets kicked off Fox. Candace Owen gets kicked off Daily Wire. Alex Jones is, quote, censored. What do you mean they're censored? They're the loudest voices in the alternative media. Everything bounces off them. They're far from censored. They're acknowledged. The off-world stage perspective does not get any acknowledgement. I had a conversation with a pretty big channel on Twitter today, and he says, well, it doesn't really matter if Charlie Kirk is dead or not, but because people believe it. And I said, no, it absolutely matters. And this is where the conspiracy theorists reveal themselves to be very shallow. By shallow, I mean, in their take, they're not looking at the longer term effects of these things. They're not taking into account the continuity. So if he's dead or alive, does it make a difference? Okay, if he's dead, then who did it? Antifa or Israel? So now you're back in the mainstream or MSM plus perspective. You're firmly ensconced within the Truman Show again. If he's alive, well then, what can we ask here? Well then, who was involved? And when you ask that question, you arrive at the answers I think they don't want you to have. Because these answers bring you into the relationship between entertainment and fake news events, and it gives you a list of names of people with zero plausible deniability as to knowing about this event being a totally staged event. So we would know Erica Kirk. Yeah, she's not in the dark. Trump, the president, is not in the dark. Frank Turek, his mentor, the author, who had some books, by the way, with book covers that all seemed to foreshadow the shooting. Frank Turek was one of the guys who helped carry the body out. Well, he would obviously know. He's been on Fox. He was at the memorial. He talked about Charlie dying in his arms and this stuff. Yeah, that guy with no blood on his hands. That guy would therefore be part of the psychological operation 28 years in the making. I mean, this is not some small, minor news event. This is a worldview shaping historic occurrence. Yeah, one of his book covers says, I think it says taken from God, and it's got the word God with like a bullet hole in the O. And the other one has the planet Earth painted in the colors of the LGBT flag with like a bullet hole in the middle, like the world's being shattered. And of course, the shooter, trans, you see how that's foreshadowing before he even knew Charlie Kirk. So what I'm trying to make clear here is that the off-world stage perspective is a distinct perspective from on-world stage. If you're a world stager, you're closer to ChatGPT than a skeptic, than a media skeptic. Because what makes ChatGPT what it is that it is generating predictive content based upon a closed informational system. It's knowledge base. It's frame of reference that has been programmed, that has been guardrailed. It has been given parameters. So if your perspective on any event is guardrailed by the world stage, then all of your interpretations are going to be predictable. All of your interpretations are going to have certain base assumptions about the reality of the world events as they have been portrayed. But this model of the world that it's objectively true, that the news is generally real until proven fake, and that everything has been real, yeah, that's been refuted. We shouldn't be operating under these types of illusions. But we have to maintain a continuity as well. Like, you have to remember, Donald Trump is a crisis actor in chief. This is season 47 of The Apprentice. News is not objective, and entertainment and psyops are merged. In fact, entertainment is used as a way of platforming government propaganda. And I think this is one of the big secrets, because I get more pushback against this fact than anything else, where you have people who are saying, oh no, the actor Erica Kirk is coincidentally mirrored by this TV show that just came out. Oh, really? And then we watched the thing with the Louvre, where the crown jewels get stolen on No King's Day. And I'm like, okay, that's a little fishy. Talked about it with fakeologists. And then we find out that there's a Netflix show called Lupin, where same thing happens, only they steal the necklace of Marie Antoinette. Well, a further connection. Marie Antoinette loses her head. No King's Day, losing the crown. There's this overlapping previous No King's Day where she was decapitated. And this neck wound stuff has been a very consistent facet in the media cycles leading up to and even following the Charlie Kirk thing. Let me go through your comments. Quite a lot here. Portal Complex, Junders, Truman B3000 from Wisconsin, Kevin Mooring, Bach Precision, M. Smith, thanks for joining. Do It Let's says hi. Kevin Mooring says it's a PSYOP Entertainment Complex production. Yeah, the PSYOP Entertainment Complex is a real thing. The military-industrial complex is a construct. What's up, Tunax, Ted Stryker, Plain Decoded, Frank Castle. Erica Creech says, the 24 years ago event and the 5 years ago events were full of agendas. The George Floyd was dusted off and inserted in 5 years ago event. Yeah, the events like that, like, say, the George Floyd event has all the indicators, without referencing the video, of being a total construct designed to incite certain responses. But there are so many indicators that it was designed a 9/11 scale event. And the symbolism, the subtext, it's all there. Bach says there's definitely a script or playbook they reference. Yeah, so when I talk about the script where you have all these fake events that adds on to our history. So we have our real history, and then you have the scripted events that add on to it. Just like you have your real news, like the sky's blue today. There's a traffic jam. And then you have the psyops they add onto it. So the stuff they add on to our history, the scripted events, are what actually steer it. That's why I call it news bending or history bending. But I call the script itself that these events are drawn from the meta script. So these are events that are superimposed onto our worldview. And before they happen, they're inserted into the entertainment in the form of predictive programming, propaganda, product placement for future fake events. What's up, Marcel Ploger? Thank you for joining. Lord Laney. Gematria 101 says, I saw an old Maxwell video. He was going over the word Kirk. Well, the word Kirk means church, and in The Tempest, the character is shot in a church. And there's a lot that ties into that. And thank you, Marcel, for the 5 blue wrenches. Uncool Ben, Cubic Z Gaming, Lowry, We, and Intelligent Counterspell. Check your front porches around 2 p.m. today for a 18-inch blue titanium wrench. HLG GLH says, hello, Penguiners. Bobby Hale says, big insider sports betting theme in Snake Eyes as well. NBA sports betting scandal blew up this week. Not the same sport, but predictable by your model. Yeah, that's an interesting connection as well. The insider bets thing, I saw that floating around and I thought, what is this going to lead to? Now, again, in Snake Eyes, there was a boxing match, and one of the boxers was Tyler the Executioner. So you got Tyler the executioner on the stage. And by the way, the boxers weren't wearing mouthpieces. Lynn Ertel pointed that out. So Tyler the executioner is on the stage while Charlie Kirkland gets shot in the neck. And then the actress who's next to him, who's in the center of the conspiracy, is VP Kirk in a concurrent movie. Amin Ra says, wouldn't it be plausible that details such as the neck wound was not defined pre-98, but was performed now using some selected film details? Well, I would say that the neck thing would have been in the script because Charlie Kirkland was shot on the same side of the neck as Charlie Kirk, as the person in Americana, as the actor in The Tempest, and his wife, and Heads of State, and the exact part of the neck where Ryan Routh gestured when he tried to stab himself with a pencil. So no, one of the components that's key in all of them is they all have a storm. They've all got the September 10th. The Tyler references. I mean, think about this. And the neck stuff is huge, but the very specific point on the neck is a key, I think, that shows you it's a common denominator. Episode 33 of Thought Crimes, Charlie Kirk is talking to a guy named Tyler about how he supports televised executions. And Tyler says, the last televised execution was in France on September the 10th, 1977. So there's that date again. And then you add to it, guillotine to the neck. John Francis, thanks for joining. Frank Castle. The Black Hand Side here with his coffee. Thanks for joining. Duets Les says, Thomas Massey was on Theo Vaughn, and some people commented that he looked as if he had been replaced or a different actor is playing him now. Maybe. People used to talk about clones, and I think clones was always disinformation for hyper-realistic masks. Frank Castle says, thank you for providing the language we need to discuss this, Tim. You're a legend. Well, there's a video that I haven't watched yet because I just assume it's another straw man coming from a place of sheer incredulity. Someone had uploaded a video about the off-world stage, and I don't know if they actually get it. Like, do you not recognize that not all points of view are equally informed? The mainstreamer is misinformed. They live in a bubble of misinformation. That's just an objective fact. And that's because their entire worldview rests upon decades, if not longer, of bent news, manipulated reality. You don't watch the news. Let's say you just don't pay attention. You're not awake. You're not in a better position. You're just uninformed. But the problem is, the only information available to you is misinformation. So you're not even in an advantageous position because when it comes time to catch up on stuff, you're just going to binge on the news. Like, oh, so a lot of people didn't watch the news and then 2020 happens, now they watch the news. So you went from uninformed to misinformed. That's not a move in the right direction. So the mainstream and its subset, the conspiracy theorists, their point of view is not equal to the point of view of somebody who is apprised of media fakery, long and short term. So the MSM minus subtractive position is, I would say it's philosophically more rational, more reasonable to be a skeptic, to be unplugged from the propaganda matrix. These are different points of view. So the off-world stage is qualitatively different. We have different conclusions. And back to that person who said, we don't have enough information. It's like, well, you speak for yourself in your own bubble. Because not all of us are operating on these faulty premises. Some of us have some additional insight. Media fakery is not a conspiracy theory. The whole crisis actor thing, it's not a conspiracy theory. That's just one facet of simulated events. Dr. Bass Ackward says, zero evidence of Erica Kirk ever being pregnant. Yeah, there's zero evidence their kids have faces. I mean, I understand privacy and all that, but just one of the fakest looking families I've ever seen. And I watched Charlie Kirk trying to like teach his kid the Pledge of Allegiance or some crap. It just looked all contrived and fake. So, and his wife shows up later, very much like, if you want to go with the conspiratorial line, you could see Charlie as a victim of a bigger conspiracy to take over his organization. Because he was just a normal 18-year-old who had $1 billion backer and created the most influential political activist. I guess it was a Turning Point USA. Trump attributed his win to their ground game. So as far as political action committees, TPUSA was a big deal. So you can look at this from a conspiratorial point of view and say, yeah, of course they'd want to put some kind of femme fatale into his life to seduce him, take over. And it was all planned from the beginning. And that is the conspiracy theory line. Lord Laney says, you're not allowed on the black Kubrick monolith unless you're part of the acting troupe. Yeah, at no point in the play do they let random audience members walk in. Yeah, you're right. So like what Lord Laney is talking about is that the movie set is a closed set. These psyops are closed sets. If you're a contributor to it, and see, here's what damns Candace Owens. This is what unequivocally puts her in the category of an insider. She has no plausible deniability. Is that every single talking point she has pushed it tracks along with the well-worn rabbit trails for controlled opposition takes on any event. It was the second shooter, the third shooter, the fourth shooter, but it always leads to Israel. It's a template. That's the woke right template. As opposed to the mainstream Republicans who will blame the left, liberalism, communism. Kenneth Dixon says, I call shenanigans. Here is your blue wrench. You'd be accurate. Plain Dakota says, I was listening to a comedian podcast or some low-level named Eric Griffin, and he was trying to figure out the Charlie Kirk thing, and he was saying that Gemini AI was telling him it was a hoax. Interesting. What they do with these AI is they install guardrails to lead you back to the mainstream. And so a guardrail, the idea here is that you're being led along a path. And if you stray from the path, the guardrail is going to knock you back onto the road. And I've been using that term since I put out a book called Guardrails, How Conspiracy Theory Rabbit Trails, I think it's Control Free Minds or something like that. But the idea was that you would have agents in the field doing this work. Now it's all AI. AI has the same programming. So you have like controlled opposition agents who are pushing some talking points. Well, they're guard-railing the conversation. So that one account I mentioned who says, it doesn't matter if Charlie Kirk is dead or alive. Yeah, that's kind of a guardrail thing to say. Because you should be entertaining the hypothetical. Well, what if he is? Because asking that one question unravels the entire world stage. If Trump wasn't really shot, it unravels the world stage. Yet there are many people who say that thing was fake, but they think Trump faked it. So they see it in isolation. None of these events happen in isolation. So Butler, Pennsylvania, especially on the left, people say, oh, Trump faked it. But they don't ask the question, if he faked it, who was involved? Well, that necessarily implies Secret Service. That necessarily means a lot of the people behind him. This would also involve media on both sides. And you go down the line, and you can see how this one fake event has saturated the entire global media, contaminated it with it, so now it's officially real because of the consensus. But when you look at it in isolation, you say, oh, Trump did it, then you're not really looking at the real perps. The media did it. Who shot JFK? It wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald. It was the media. The entire media is complicit in staging these things. And when I say the entire media, I'm not just talking about the news media. I'm talking about the entire co-opted worldview shaping apparatus, including entertainment. That's why you had the Manchurian Candidate, and suddenly, right before the JFK thing. Even the news commentators on 11/22/63 were talking about lapses in security that have led to previous assassinations. Like they were priming everybody. Dr. Backasword says, I don't think Charlie Kirk ever existed. It's just the name of a character in a play. Well, exactly. The individual who wore the squib on September 10th, that guy, was not a real Christian, conservative, spreading Christian positive values, working for Jesus. No, that guy was an actor, a deceiver. And all the followers are deceived. This is mass deception. And look at how many people it's influenced. This fake martyr, this fake saint. But he took on the role, but there's no reason to assume that he pre-existed, that he was selected as a toddler for this role. No. They had a pool of individuals from which to draw their Charlie Kirk for the assassination after a 13-year run. All staged. Kenneth Dixon says, all the worlds indeed of age were merely players, performers, and portrayers. Yeah, that's why I think it's interesting that Hulu's The Tempest, Shakespeare reference, is one of the main indicators of this being totally scripted. And The Tempest, of course, is where you get the phrase Brave New World from. DeWitt's Les says it almost looks like a penguin. Yeah, I've almost created a penguin out of this thing. You're right. I can kind of see it. That's the beak right there. Kenneth says, AI's been here thousands of years, maybe hundreds of thousands. That's why it's so hard to keep the faith. I don't necessarily agree with that. But I think this system is just going through a new iteration, and it's not new. I think what we're experiencing with media has previously been done by religion, by basically, we're talking about worldview synchronization. You can put everybody through the same holy book, Dianetics, the Bible, the Quran, and if you have them in isolation in their own bubble, you put them in their own little fictional universe, you can kind of see how this works. It's very cult-like. Shaping somebody's worldview is really a matter of getting them to accept the boundaries that you place. Kenneth Dixon says, they told us everything to our faces, ears and eyes. Our silence has been compliance. Yeah, I call this psychological warfare. You have to look at the masses of having been subdued, conquered mentally. It's the supreme art of war, according to Sun Tzu. To defeat your enemy without drawing your sword. HLG says, whiteboard extremism. DeWitt said, Les asks, is there any wolf themes going on? Both Louvre and Lupin in the French series refer to wolf. Ooh, interesting connection. The main connection I saw there was the crown jewels being stolen during the No Kings protest, and the concurrent TV show has a necklace from Marie Antoinette being stolen, who lost her head during a No Kings protest. Inks G says, I don't think YouTube heard this raft. Yeah, well, there's a lot of mainstream truthers who don't like that. There are people fighting tooth and nail against the premise that entertainment is used to advertise, bolster, and condition us for future psyops. Like, that's not a challenging proposition. Like, anything but that, don't say that. Please, can we blame the simulation? Can we just call these coincidences? No. No, this is systemic fakery, and entertainment and psyops and the news are coming from the same source and all work towards the same end. And I think the reason why this is such a guarded secret is we can name names. We can name metascriptors. We can name the names of the sellout artists, directors, and writers who are contributing to the metascript and therefore to the psyops. Like John Frankenheimer, Stanley Kubrick, and down the list you go, where you increasingly take away plausible deniability. You look at the people directly involved in the psyops. You look at the overlapping police chiefs, news reporters, and you get this picture where, yeah, we can assemble a name of who. If you want to talk about who's doing it, who's behind the conspiracy, well, at the lower levels, we can identify, but moreover, we can demonstrate that it exists. And what is it? The meta, the hijacking of our reality, the script that they are bending our history to match. Events aren't organically going the way the meta script would foresee decades in the future. No, they have to make it happen. How do they make it happen? You manufacture it with actors, with psyops. Erica Creech says, these selfish people using surrogacy make me a little bit sick. Are you talking about the Kirks? Well, Charlie Kirk is not dead. We don't know his real name. If you think he's dead, what's your evidence? Because I would argue that, especially now in 2025, I think we're stronger in this point. You can't say I saw it on TV, so it's real. And for you to say it's real, the burden of proof is on you to address every single hoax indicator that has been raised. Anywhere that the event has deviated from standard protocol when it comes to murders, shootings, assassinations, crime scenes, deaths, there are so many ways that it goes against the standard protocol, anomalies, and then you throw in the entertainment media predictive concurrent programming. You have to explain that away. You got to explain away the Erica Kirk conundrum, how her entire world stage personage matches this corresponding Hulu character from The Tempest. I mean, you don't have a leg to stand on if you think he's alive. All you have is faith. I have faith that what the black monolith showed me is true. Okay. That's what I mean when I say we don't have the same perspective. Cygirl says it was a Pentagon military psyop. That's what Candace Owens said. This was a military op. No, it's a media op. It wasn't done by the military industrial complex. It was done by the psyop entertainment complex. The Pentagon is a prop as much as anything else. I mean, obviously this is all mind war, but no, this was not a military psyop. This is just like every other psyop. It's no different than the Kardashians, the Kirks, the Kardashians. They're faked from the same source for the same purpose, which is worldview shaping, influence operations, shaping culture, shaping society. But no, this wasn't a special or unique or more serious, grave event by any means. Ribo Nation says, I got an enough is enough in the new Law and Order the other night. Yeah, so the last YouTube video that Charlie Kirk uploaded was called Enough is Enough, which has been repeatedly used to reference the upcoming Trump head shooting. Then it happened, and afterward, Hulk Hogan gets up on stage and says, enough is enough, when they try to shoot the president. And of course, this all harkens back to the Illuminati playing card, Stephen Jackson, enough is enough, the sniper can take you anywhere, anytime, and it looks like Trump. So for Charlie Kirk to reference enough is enough, interesting. For Ryan Routh, would-be Trump shooter, to nearly Kirk himself in the courtroom and squib all over the place, and judging by the courtroom photo, poking himself in the same spot. Yeah, these are all interconnected elements. Kenneth says, government and religion were created for one reason, control and authority. Yeah, I would even go further and say there's only one government, and there's only one religion. If you define religion as worldview, all the little religions out there fall under this one worldview, the mainstream mediated one, the dominant paradigm. That dominant paradigm is our religion. That dominant paradigm is created by government, just one big capital G. Cygirl says, keep protecting the Pentagon's role in staging elaborate psyops. I'd say stay in your mainstream media box where you think that there's a military industrial complex. No, it's the psyop entertainment complex. It's all mind war. It's not military psyops, it's theater as mind control. Bread and circuses. This is not a deviation. I put out a book recently called Handbook for the Recently Deprogrammed, A Skeptic's Guide to the Theater of Psywar. So if you've deprogrammed yourself from the knee-jerk reactions, taking sides, if you stepped outside of the political horseshoe, if you recognize the long-term cumulative effects of fake history, if you recognize history bending, then you're to some large extent deprogrammed. The handbook for the recently deprogrammed, is designed to give you the lexicon, the definitions, and the concepts to explain it, to articulate it, to recognize that your point of view is separate. That's why we're not looking like who did it. It was the Pentagon. No, it was the media. It was the government. It's bigger than the Pentagon. That's just a misdirection. That's a red herring. Girl says, as long as we keep blaming the media exclusively, we don't have to worry about the troops and real ammo. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you're of the perspective that it's going to escalate, you're living in the MSM plus nightmare. See, in your version of reality, troops are going to run down the street and shoot you with bullets. And I'm out here and I'm just basically sitting in a park, relaxing, not responding to it actively, but waiting till I get more facts. You're still plugged in if you think you're going to get shot. If you got a helmet on, if you're in a bunker, if you're wearing body armor, if you're worried about the Pentagon and they're going to come put their boot in your face, they've got you under total submission and mind control. You're us. And I'm not judging you, Girl, but your perspective is MSM plus. And skeptics have always been, if you go back to the original skeptics, and the idea of suspension of judgment being intrinsic to it, it's always been the additional sense of disconnectedness from the world that makes them look like they're lazy or inactive or unconcerned, too relaxed. Like, why aren't you triggered? So like the moral high ground goes to the activists who act like they're holding everything together and they're getting ready for war. And then I, on the other hand, I look lazy. I look like I'm inactive, like I'm encouraging people to not fight back. But if you look back to the original skeptics, they said the long-term effects of this kind of suspension of judgment led to a peace of mind. So what would you prefer? Peace of mind or a war in your head? And if you're in this MSM plus box, they've got a war in your head. Like in your mind, it's conceivable that tanks will come down the street and troops will come murder you. I think that's a hyperstition they've put in your head. You're not worried about school shooters, are you? If you were a mainstreamer, you'd be worried about a bowl-cut neo-Nazi with an AR-15 shooting your kids. These are hyperstitions. If you're a mainstreamer, you believe that space junk might come crush your skull while you sleep, or that climate change is going to destroy the world and your grandchildren are going to live in a barren wasteland. Remember peak oil? Mad Max? Think about all the nightmare scenarios in this box. So these nightmare scenarios are part of their instrument of governance. I call these God constructs. Like if you're worried about the nuke, they're going to nuke the world. Well, now you live in the end times. From the off-world stage perspective, I don't believe in school shooters. I don't believe in space junk. I don't believe in nukes. I don't think the Pentagon's going to send troops to come shoot me for some dumb reason. These things aren't a factor when I plot my day on my to-do list. I'm not wearing body armor. I'm not wearing a helmet. And I'm not trying to like Paul Revere my neighborhood. Wake up, the deep state's coming. How far did that get you in 2020? What good did the activism you engaged in 2020 do, other than increase your stress levels? Nothing. You did nothing. You spread fear and confusion. If you're spreading this stuff, you're what I call a propaganda mule, because you're not getting paid for it. You're just voluntarily packing up your saddlebags with red pills, and you're chasing a carrot around. They're leading you around, and you're packing propaganda for them. And what is the carrot? The Great Awakening, the Great Reset, waking everybody up to this. Girl says, keep protecting the Pentagon brass. Again, I would argue that you are actually defending the PSYOP entertainment complex. If you're advocating for this perspective, you're in the Psy war, You're actually fighting on behalf of the Truman Show. You are the controlled opposition. If you're telling me that I should be worried about school shooters, you're controlled opposition. If you're telling me that I should be worried about the deep state, you're controlled opposition. Because both sides are. Mainstream is controlled opposition to alternative. Alternative is opposition that's controlled, and it's opposing the mainstream. Outside, we are inactivists, conscientious objectors to the psi war. Like, I'm not part of your psi war. So if you think I'm protecting it, I have a better case to say that you're actually reinforcing the power of this institutionalized deception. You're a pawn in their game. Psi Girl says they want you to be impressed by their stupid movies. No, you're living in their stupid movie. And we're criticizing it from the outside. But you've always had this perspective. And I've always appreciated it. I've always said that Lynn Ertel is one of our greatest exemplars of the MSM plus subset, because what she advocates is mainstream's bad, alternative has the truth, we got to fight the mainstream. You see, this is the dialectic that you're locked in. And you're probably locked into it for emotional reasons, and that's fine, because that's how the mind war gets you. It gets you emotionally, where you're literally worried that troops are going to come shoot you. And then it makes it easy to look down on those of us who look like we don't give a damn. Well, we're just not overreacting. And one more point to this, because, and this was, if you look at the origin of skepticism and how it leads to what they called ataraxia, which is peace of mind, it was suggested that even if we went into a state of war, who do you want to follow? Let's say that the troops do come. Do you want to follow the red pills who've been losing their shit this entire time? Or do you want to follow the people who are calm, who have clear thinking, clarity, who aren't overreacting? Calm people in the chaos. In a mind war, you've already lost your mind. If shit gets real, I don't think you're going to hold it together. And no, it's not going to go kinetic. It's not going to go real. Maddie Ice 2025 says it's Planet Netflix. Yeah, it's Planet Netflix. We're in the Disney universe. Nicotrauma says, I used to own body armor. I was totally captured. I was totally captured. I was in the military. My job was unit preparedness for nuclear fallout. So I believed we were in the end times. I believed all that stuff. If you live in a bunker because you're worried about nukes, guess what? You're living in a solitary FEMA camp and you're totally mind controlled because the thing that you're bunkered against doesn't even exist. Dr. Bass Ackworth says it's good to stay away from pills of any color. Well, yeah, because the Normieville, we're talking about the mainstream paradigm. They've got themselves this blue pill, and it puts you to sleep. You're dreaming. When I say dreaming, you're just accepting the worldview as presented, and we know it's bent. We know it's fundamentally a dream world. The red pill, by contrast, says all that's fake, things are way worse than it is, we're about to die, the Pentagon's going to get us. So the red pill is an agitated pill, so it's a nightmare pill. And it's actually the fact that it's rooted in the blue pill. The blue pill is the basis for it, it's a subset. Then you have this thing called the black pill, and the black pill is the idea that you can't change anything, that it's hopeless, but it's a variant of the red pill. But anyway, you have all these different, quote, pills. And the idea of a pill is that you're a patient and somebody's prescribing it to you and you're taking it. So like blue pills are for normies, but if you are agitated and the normie stuff doesn't hold you down, they give you something harder. So give this person some red pills. But both of these represent a dependency. So whether you're mainstream or alternative, blue or red pill, you're dependent on the drug dealer. Who's the drug dealer? The PSYOP entertainment complex. That is dealing you the drugs. HG says, I think these hyperstitions are possible if they convince enough low-info auto-believers into action, like self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, on a limited basis. I mean, they do get people involved. You do have normies out there who are losing their jobs, getting kicked out of school because they're cheering on the death of Charlie Kirk. They invite audience participation. It's designed to make you adhere to an ideology within their political horseshoe. And it's also designed to give this appearance that, yeah, there is this MAGA extremism, and if terrorism happens, it will be plausible to blame MAGA. So the public actually participates on some level. And occasionally you do see people spilling out onto the world stage and getting involved and getting arrested for their involvement. You do have dupes. Cygirl says, by implicating the government and Pentagon as central to PSYOPs, we're doing what? Well, I think we're limiting our view to the Pentagon, some identifiable source. Like, I would argue here that this is global in scale. I mean, this is another interesting point, is Hulu The Tempest is in South Korea, #1 show in Japan, #1 show in Taiwan, South Korea. It's blowing up all over the world. It's a South Korean spy thriller, yet the PSYOP it pertains to is America. And it's a PSYOP about the assassination of Americana. And it's global then, therefore, the imagery, the concept, the very specific visual of the martyred leader of the Youth Republicans getting shot in the neck in front of his audience. Like, that theme was painted onto the zeitgeist globally. So if we just point fingers at the Pentagon or that particular country, I think you're limiting your perspective. It's not a whodunit. It's a what is it. We need to figure out what it is first. And what it is it's worldview warfare, adhering to a meta-scripted version of events imposed over history, bending it into a very specific frame, which is representative of a power elite's monopoly. It's like a new monotheism. Yeah, if you're blaming military and cops, that's pretty much these are like red pill talking points. Like, the government's going to take your guns. It's like they've already taken your minds. And the grab your guns narrative is built off of Waco, and it's all intrinsic to the white nationalist turning point, which is relevant here. Turning Point USA came to my attention because I said, wait a minute here. Turning Point USA is platforming the whole idea of the turning point, or the Turner Diaries. The Turner Diaries is the book that motivated McVeigh to attack the government building. So this anti-government sentiment, that's all red pill right-wing claptrap. Left is pro-government, right is anti-government. So if you're espousing it's the military, it's the cops, yeah, you're in this box. That is your perspective. You might as well own it. Like, if you're a mainstreamer, own it. If you're alternative, own it. Don't pretend like you don't have a perspective here. And perspective matters. And it makes you this is that adhering to any of these world stage perspectives, you're programmed, and you can be triggered in predictable ways to react in predictable ways, to have predictable opinions to every single event that is presented to you. Cygirl says, is your position that TV execs issue orders to the White House and Pentagon and Wall Street? No. No, my position is that these things are top down. Every single PSYOP isn't, every one of them involves necessarily the interlocking cooperation between different organizations. You've got Department of Homeland Security, the media, the police, the hospitals. At some level, we're dealing with individuals in each with high security clearance. You could say security clearance society. HLG says, normies struggle with mental illness. HG says, is there something as a clear pill? Well, the thing is that any kind of pill suggests a dependency on a third party for information. Out here, we are self-mediated, not medicated, self-mediated. We have a psychological distance between that which we accept as real and that which we find as false. So the informed disbeliever or the informed non-believer isn't ignorant. It's not a position of willful ignorance. We actually know more about the stories these people believe in. Think about that. The people who believe these things literally know less about the event than those of us who think these events are fake. And we think these events are fake because we have reasons. Like I saw this poll and it said, like a study, it said 8% of Americans think the moon landing was fake. Well, what's the difference between the 92% of believers and the 8% of non-believers? What's the difference? They believe what they saw on TV. They looked at the other information. So the 8% have more information. Conspiracy theorists are always characterized as having these wild mind maps. You put on a tinfoil hat, you do a big mind map like this. Well, it's because they have more information. So the informed disbeliever has more information than the low information believer, which gives them additional information. And you'll find though, and this is how people are trained, the 92% are not skeptics. They're not saying, well, let me examine your information and think about it. No, they say, oh, you're wearing a tinfoil hat. That's crazy. Oh, this guy thinks the moon landing was fake. That's crazy. Well, that's not skeptic. That's not a skeptic. That's not a skeptical frame of mind. That is personal incredulity as an argument. It's a fallacy. Kenneth Dixon said McVeigh did nothing in Oklahoma City. Yeah, well, see, McVeigh, Girl says was a war vet. Yeah, he was obviously intel. So at Waco, you had McVeigh, Alex Jones. Both of these individuals got radicalized at Waco. Waco, you have Dave Koresh, 33-year-old. His followers thought it was Jesus. The ATF incinerated him when they came to take the guns because they had 1.6 million rounds. 1.6, sound familiar? Alex Jones is radicalized at Waco. He rebuilds the Branch Davidian church. Timothy McVeigh was radicalized at Waco. And on the anniversary of Waco, he bombs Oklahoma City. This is where Alex Jones gets his anti-government, they're gonna take the guns narrative from. It all goes back to Waco. Where did Trump kick off his last campaign? Waco. What did Netflix have the night before? Waco, American Apocalypse. Waco is ground zero for this far-right domestic violent extremism that populates the world stage. It's all contrived, it's all fake. And you look at this martyr, Dave Koresh, 33, McVeigh, executed on 6/11/01, at the age of 33. Totally fake. He's said to have blown up 168 people. 19 of them were children in a government daycare. Interestingly, some have said that Special Agent Paul Weissapal out in Miami, this FBI individual, is McVeigh, grown up. Looks just like him. And interestingly, Weissapal was credited with saving 168 people from human trafficking. He got some award. I'm like, oh, interesting. What a character arc. You're a villain. You blew up 168. Now you're a hero. You saved 168. There are so many indicators, but that's probably true. I don't really care. It has nothing to do with the big meta scripted story, whether or not they recycle actors, but if you wanted to make the case for it, there's a pretty strong one with McVeigh. Duet Said Less says, I first thought this video was a private remedial tuition for JLB on the off-world stage. Well, he did a video on the off-world stage, and I didn't even bother watching it because I tend to think he's habitually incredulous, personally incredulous, and he builds up a straw man. And, you can do that, but it doesn't make our argument go away. Like, if you really want to discredit or dispute the world stage perspective and model and how it's built upon decades of fake events that bend the normal news cycles, if you want to dispute that, go for it. If you want to say that we all have the same perspective and point of view, we're all responding to the same facts, go for it. It's just not true. This is worldview warfare. Kenneth Dixon says, Koresh could be Charlie Kirk's dad. I'd have to check the timelines on it. I mean, it is a closed set, sure. Yeah, plain decoded Waco, wacko. I thought that was like one of these things. Perfect, right? Kenneth Dixon says, I would argue that Ruby Ridge is ground zero. There was a movie out last year called Rebel Ridge about racist police that run the police departments. And they run a black man off his bicycle and steal his money. He's going to bail his cousin out. And then he has to take revenge on them. Well, that opening scene was replayed with Tyreek Hill from the Miami Dolphins, yanked out of his car on the way to a game. And people made these comparisons. Hey, this was just like Netflix, Rebel Ridge. Because apparently life follows Netflix. Or, and if you know what Netflix is and where it came from and its co-founder and CEO, and you look at this, it's like, well, no, fake events follow Netflix. So that's what we're looking at here. The entertainment is used to condition us, to get us to formulate opinions and reactions to things before they happen. It's all product placement. That's why we see a consistent relationship between entertainment and psyops. We've demystified predictive programming. And anyone debunking or refuting predictive programming on the basis that you've got a million things to choose from, you're just retrofitting it, not true. We have a very small set of content to draw from because we're looking at the real-time alignments between Hulu, Netflix, the video games, the books, the celebrities talking about these things. We're talking about real-time alignments between these things and events. So we're not limited in scope to movies. We're not just drawing from television. I don't watch TV all day. I only watch, if I'm consciously scanning, because we have a model here, and you can make extrapolations from it. I'll look at what is the number one thing, and I'm not watching it for my entertainment. I'm not watching it to cherry pick stuff. I'm watching it to see what ideas are being pumped into the minds of the mainstream. How are they being programmed? Because everything that happens in the program has been previously programmed into the minds of the soon-to-be believers in the new event. Again, this is a formula. Lord Laney says, an aptronym world stage name, Waco Wacko. They wanted that association. Yeah, I think so too. Let's Go says, JLB's error is that he believes that since personal coincidences are probably higher powers, the world stage coincidences come from the same place. Yeah, well, that's been the explanation for a long time because it was always spooky when somebody would point out, hey, look, yet again, there's a movie that perfectly mirrors what happens in real life. But when you do the empirical research and you recognize that these are not anomalies, then it draws a different picture. Once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, 3 times is deliberate action. That's Ian Fleming. And we're looking at repeated themes. I mean, you take Butler, Pennsylvania. This is just an example. Because every single instance of concurrent programming is an example of something that was produced in the past. Could be months, could be years. But yet the release dates coincide with the PSYOP. So we had the trailer for Captain America, which was Brave New World. So if you didn't see this, president gets shot at while he's at the podium. And there's nuance to every single one of these. If we get into Harrison Ford, shot in a theater, his birthday being the Butler date, 7/13. Captain America, Marvel Comic Universe actually changed the trailer that came out on 7/12. Because it perfectly predicted what happened to Trump. They changed it after that. You had the season finale of The Boys where the character known as the Homelander, who's admittedly based on Trump, is the target of an assassination plot. They changed the title of Assassination Run. The visuals are there, where he's got his face covered in blood. But anyway, he survives his attempt. And of course, this is concurrent with the real event. We had the Francis Ford Coppola Megalopolis with Megalon, Make Rome Great Again, obviously based on Trump. The main character, Caesar Catalina, based on Trump, survives an assassination attempt. He gets shot, but he survives. And these are all concurrent. You had this Batman, Caped Crusader, and a character named Rupert Thorne, a very Trump-esque character, has his right ear cut by Batman's boomerang at the end of the season with an ominous warning that it would be back. Beetlejuice. In the netherworld, you had a dead Trump, yellow, golden uniform, golden hair, American lapel pin. We had, again, I'm just going through, off the top of my head, a list of things that were concurrent with Mickey 17, which they said had no relation to Butler because it was produced 2 years before. Mickey 17 had Mark Ruffalo, interestingly born on 11/22, representing Trump. So another guy representing the president, born on a day that a president gets shot. Mark Ruffalo is playing a Trump-esque character. Not only is he shot, but he's got a blood streak on his cheek. And then he yells at the cameraman to turn the camera on so he can pose for the cameras with his bloody face wound. Sound familiar? Fight, fight, fight. And this is just a small group. I mean, there are many more. But all of these were happening in the same closed system at the time of Butler. And this is a reoccurring theme. It's in the magazines. It's on the magazine covers. There's foreshadowing all over the place. How many times did we hear enough is enough? Andrea says, I watch TV and the screen. Most people pretty much meditate in front of it. Yeah, I look at the big screen, the big monolith. This is the worldview shaping mechanism. The totality of everything in the media ecosystem as presented to you through your curated worldview finder. Your worldview finder being your smartphone. We'll call it a worldview finder. Your viewfinder on a camera, on the old cameras, the little square you look through to frame your shot. So we've got our worldview finders. Most people live with their noses pressed up against it. And this is their primary frame of reference, which includes the entire bent history. So they're resting upon an edifice of fakery. They are in a non-objective worldview. Just like fundamentalist religion would put you in a non-objective worldview. It's infused with mysticism, with myths, with martyrs, with false historic accounts. So you're looking at everyone, their noses to the screen, peripheral information, anything outside of it, no, they don't care. You're over here saying, hey, that's all fake. They're not going to turn around and look at you. So we're socially distanced. MSM minus subtracts from our worldview that which can't be verified. So we're stepped away from the screen, their nose against it. The conspiracy theorists, the MSM plus, the real agitated ones who think the sky is falling, yeah, they exist inside of the screen. They're in a subset. They're even deeper in the program. So they're on the other side of the screen. The rest of them are noses to the screen. And then we're socially distanced from the screen. So I don't watch TV in a passive sense. These are passive, these are passive. I watch it knowing that it's separate from the world, one, and I'm recognizing that whatever's on here is programming what's going into their heads. So I recognize what's in their heads, and I recognize their worldview, and it's distinct from ours. So their point of view is not the same as our point of view out here off-world stage, because it does not include long-term media fakery. It doesn't include the relationship between entertainment and psyops. They think the news is real, and they think entertainment is completely separate from this. It's naive. It's mind controlled. Catch up on your comment. Let's Go says, what I don't get about JLB is he's a history is fake guy, so why is he incredulous that there's propaganda for fake events? Yeah, this is a good point. It's worth reiterating. And I appreciate his work. I think it's very important that we have people representative of different perspectives putting forth their ideas, and we'll let the facts speak for themselves. Because, facts are stubborn things, and they don't care about feelings or personal feelings like incredulity, which is not skepticism. So if we look at the fake news, and when we say fake news, we're talking about simulated events, simulated historic events that shape worldview, significant things. So fake news piles up, and this is the now, and this is the past. So we're watching the fake news as it bends reality. At what point does it become history? 10 years ago? 50 years ago? 200 years ago? Because there are people who say, oh, history's fake, you can't verify anything past 200 years, and maybe it was a big mud flood. Okay, well, the mechanism by which history is faked is an ongoing process. It's proactive. It's not just retroactive. It's not like they just burned all the history books and gave us new ones and retroactively changed history. No, history is a construct, and it's proactively made. Every fake pre-scripted event, every meta-scripted event is proactively inserted into our timeline through the mechanism of simulated news events. This is the formula. This is the process. This is how they implement their program. And if you follow the program, if you believe it, or if you're confused and you sort of believe it, you don't know, guess what? You are programmed. You're in their domain. You're in their Truman Show bubble. And those of us who are outside of the bubble, who are socially distanced from the screen, have a different point of view. So you may say, I don't know. I'm incapable of knowing. I'm ambiguous. Yeah, well, that's because your frame of reference, your perspective is limited. But you don't need to project your ignorant take on those of us who have more intel. The informed disbelievers have acquired an intellectual high ground, as far as our vantage point, than the low information believers and the low information disbelievers. So again, to explain what the world stage is succinctly, the world stage is the collectively agreed upon version of things as they are. And there are major points of collective agreement, despite all of our minor disagreements. So the world stage would be where we are, when we are, what just happened, and what is happening. These are major points of agreement. And these are the points that orient us and give us our perspective. The mainstream perspective, which again, you'll see it reflected in mainstream news, AI, wiki, it's all about the consensus. As attributed to Napoleon Bonaparte, as he supposedly said, history is lies agreed upon. Well, guess what? So is news. News media, lies agreed upon by the masses. And we're significantly outnumbered. And here's the big reveal, is that the alternative media agrees on all the same bullshit. Alternative media and mainstream media are part of the closed informational system. They're both architecture within the same system. The alternative media is not outside the box. It's not free thinkers. No, it's a steam valve for those who are following their instincts. At least they're smart enough, at least they're in touch enough with their instincts to know they're being lied to from the mainstream. But they're easy prey. And I think it's pathetic now. I see them chasing Candace Owens. It's like you realize that these rabbit trails that you're going down to find out the truth have been paved maybe 50 years since, at least. Well-worn rabbit trails. These aren't new meandering trails that you're following, trying to get to a truth that the mainstream's hiding from you. No, these things are paved. You're being led down a predetermined course. These are engineered narratives. So if they got you in a state of reactivity, of fear, of senses of impending doom, if you think we're in the end times, if you believe things are escalating and they're going to come get you, then you've been subdued. It's like if you're in your bunker, surviving off of MREs, cleaning your guns, reading your Bible, listening to Alex Jones, you're not off the grid. You're completely programmed in a FEMA camp made for you. You're your own prison warden, and they've totally hijacked your mind. Yeah, exactly, watching Mama, the breadcrumbs. So that they're taking these breadcrumbs and they think, oh, it's the second shooter, it's the third shooter. Oh, look, at least she's just asking questions. Candace Owens is just asking questions. No, she's not just asking questions. Oh, I'm just asking. No, that's not what they're doing. Every one of her questions is loaded with a premise. Every one of her questions leads to a predictable place. Loaded questions, so they don't have to take accountability for what they're actually saying. Yeah, some commenter says, Candace probably spent her holidays having beers on the beach with Charlie. Yeah, and look, right now, and I brought this up yesterday, and the stream didn't go out for some reason. Right now, she's melting down. She said, and this is fascinating. She said, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk are probably cyborgs, and if you stab them, I wonder if they would bleed. So she says that, which is already bad. I mean, she said not literally, but she said it. She says that after one of her fans threatened a bunch of people who they believed were responsible for killing Charlie Kirk because of Candace Owens. So Candace Owens is already being blamed for psychotic followers joining her cult and becoming violent. And now she jokes about stabbing Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, and she talks about, quote, demonic AI. How many times have I said that the woke right is conditioned to see aliens and AI as demonic? So she says demonic AI, and then she says that the elite are sacrificing children, doing bad things to children to summon demons. So now she's bringing on QAnon type stuff. So she's like, and she even said, quote, and I think she might be quoting Tucker Carlson, demons are real. That's a Candace Owens quote. So now she's suggesting that AI is demonic and they're summoning the demons by sacrificing children. I mean, this is just all new David Icke plus Alex Jones with a bunch of other stuff thrown in there. But as she's delivering this, she's disheveled. She's not wearing makeup. Her hair looks frazzled. Her clothes look frumpy. She's not your usual Candace Owens. Recently, she's been described as a high-functioning schizophrenic. She's having apophenia. She's making connections that aren't there. Yeah, this is all true. She is playing that role. So Candace Owens was not only not trying to lead you to the truth, but she doesn't actually believe any of this stuff. These are propaganda lines. She doesn't suddenly believe in demons. Her conversion to Christianity was performative, as it was with the Brand, what's his name, Russell Brand. Charlie Kirk's Christianity was performative. It's all an act. And if you go past the ambiguity of, I don't know if he was dead or alive, or maybe he's alive, maybe he's not. If you can't get past the fog of Psywar, if you can't get past that confusion, you're not going to arrive at these other points, these especially salient points that are necessary to understand the world stage. That this is an act, and the act has a purpose. Lasers Go Pew Pew says, when people you love try to unalive you, I definitely believe in demons. Well, I guess we have to define these things. You know, is this an adjective? Are you referring to like a third-party entity? But when it comes to Candace Owens in particular, they're playing into their base. Like Tucker Carlson, who also said demons are real, claims that a demon slid its clawed hands down his back and left long 14-inch scars. Not that he's going to show us. And he also says aliens are demons. So aliens are demons. AI are demons. This is worldview warfare. They're pandering to the superstitions and preconceptions of their base. But now the reason why I'm pointing this out, that what she's saying is all fake, is that clearly I think they want to define for the mainstream what conspiracy theorists are. They're paranoid, they're anti-Semitic, they are suffering from mental illness, they are possibly dangerous, getting their followers to kill their enemies. I mean, this is all script. The JFK assassination is definitely something that was used to create the conspiracy theory subculture. They defined the conspiracy theorist after that event. The term conspiracy theorist was then leveraged to put the burden of proof on the news consumer. So if you don't believe what's on the monolith, unquestioningly, guess what? You're one of them. You're a conspiracy theorist with a tinfoil hat. You're a dunce if you don't believe. But the burden of proof is on the media to provide evidence. And if their evidence is contradicted by hoax indicators, anomalies, deviations from standard protocol, if there are reasons to not believe, then why should you believe? Because now your belief is unreasonable, and that's the mainstreamer. The non-believer is the reasonable person in the room because they know what the mainstream person believes, but they have additional factors to consider that prevent them from believing. But these additional factors do not go into the mainstream mind because they only get their info direct from the screen. The only way to get these additional factors is to take an outside perspective. So this is the world stage perspective and the off-world stage perspective. The off-world stage perspective is differentiated primarily by the fact that they are aware of hoax indicators, anomalies, things that would make you not believe, peripheral information, stuff you wouldn't see if your nose is pressed up against the screen. All right, so I hope I've been clear. I'm mainly doing this for the rehearsal. This is practice. I'm trying to put together a succinct 45-minute breakdown of the metascript, the world stage, and history bending, and how it all relates to the relationship between entertainment and psychological operations, and the different points of view that one can have with regard to the closed informational system of the world stage. Moreover, in addition to defining the world stage, I'm defining it as a product of a program, the program being the show, the bread and circuses that are going to be presented to you, which consist of the fake simulated events on the script being imposed onto reality. So the world stage is a reality plus bread and circuses, plus reality augmentation. So it's a worldview that has fiction fused into it, which what Baudrillard would call hyper-reality. And all these things that people believe in, all the threats, 5G towers, fluoride in the water, school shooters, National Guard, whatever they are using to terrorize you right now, that's the point of it. They want you terrorized. This is actually terrorism. At a fundamental level, that's what it comes down to. It's fear of gods, instrumentum regnus, let me put this down. You can look this up on Wiki. Instrumentum regni, the tools of monarchy. And it refers to how superstition maintains the cohesion of the Roman state. Well, superstition, referring in that case to the fear of gods, God constructs. Well, today's God constructs are the mass shooters, the atom bombs, all these various ways that they terrorize the masses into compliance. The pandemic, COVID is a major one. They reintroduced like sin. You know, it's a new iteration of sin, whereby the priesthood can control the individual followers by regulating their behaviors. These are analogous systems for control. But overall, we're talking about a superstition-enhanced worldview. But I use the word hyperstition, the difference being, superstition, like werewolves, Bigfoot, aliens. But a hyperstition is something that is reinforced by the world stage. So aliens wouldn't even be considered a superstition. When you compare them to, let's say, werewolves. So a werewolf is a superstition to explain things that people can't explain otherwise, but aliens are given credibility by the box, by the world stage rather. It's reinforced. The Pentagon talks about it, there's cover-up stories. So the fact that the belief in aliens is actually encouraged would make this a hyperstition. If you run around saying you saw an alien, the system is going to back you up. If you run around saying you've seen a werewolf, they're going to lock you up. So the designated official superstitions that we're allowed to believe in are actually hyperstitions. Jamarin May says, as long as they have the majority of the world fooled, they could care less about the fringe. Yeah, exactly. And the fringe is just not acknowledged. The off-world stage perspective does not exist to them. We do not exist. And I'm fine with that for now. What difference does it make? Because the only people I'm interested in reaching right now are those who've already recognized the long-term effects of the program and who understand the relationship between entertainment and psyops and how you can use this to deduce certain things, specifically long-term planned fake events designed to manipulate our history that have done so successfully as far back as we look. Yeah, history's fake, but it's not like history stopped being fake and now it's all legitimate. No, look at any history book of the last 100 years and what's it going to tell you? It's going to give you the mainstream perspective. So history faking is an ongoing, proactive process. History is a construct. Our shared worldview represents a monopoly by a power elite who put us into a collective Truman Show. And the only way out is to see it. And you're not going to see it unless you're a skeptic. If you're merely personally incredulous, you're not going to know that you're in it. All right, thanks for your comments. We'll continue this conversation later today. Appreciate you all. Your research in the Discord, it's very active. Subscribe at ips.monster if you want to get in the Discord. I'm going to be in there today. I'm opening up a new room for memes, a separate room. It's one of the things that we lost when our first channel went down. So make sure you get into the Discord server. Gilded will be shutting down, and any content that you posted in Gilded will be migrated into Discord very soon. I'm going to wait until December because they're shutting it down December 20th, but I'm not really investing any time into that sinking ship. I'm putting my focus now into making our Discord into a hub of research 24/7 from an off-world stage perspective. And you'll find that we don't have any mainstreamers in there. We don't have any red pill doomers trying to get us to go into our bunkers. It's just pure research, and we're adding the memes. All right, thanks for your time.